You know, Ryan Reynolds should really stop doing comic book movies because obviously they just haven't worked for him. I mean, people were excited when he got cast as Deadpool, but then X-Men Origins Wolverine, and, well, the less said about Green Lantern, the better. It's just a case that each comic book movie he seems to be in either is mediocre or really bad. This one is more an example of the former rather than the latter. With that said, let's get started with this week's episode of Romney's Reviews. The first thing I have to say about this film is that although the concept was interesting, it wasn't executed particularly well, mostly because it feels kind of light and underdeveloped. On top of that, it feels like a comic book movie in the sense that there was a lot of information and details that were in the original comics that were either truncated or excised and just weren't really incorporated into the film. Now, the effects in this film, while they're passable, at least with the effects on the destruction and the environments, the effects on the deados, well, were kind of lacking. They kind of felt like they were somewhere between the CGI from the 90s and a game for the GameCube. That's kind of where the visual animation on the deados were. I mean, I understand they're not trying to be realistic, but they're not really stylized enough to really, well, look passable. It's not quite in the uncanny valley, but it's just kind of a case where the animation needed polish, badly. And with that as the story overall, I mean, given what little we're seeing about the world and kind of how it works, well, it's just kind of forgettable, really. I mean, the only thing I really remember is the human bit and some of the comedy bits, which the comedy bits were fairly good. The action was kind of since it was fairly cartoony and not in a good way, but in a bad way where there's no real suspension of disbelief. I mean, the main characters are pretty much invincible, so there's no real tension in those action scenes. Even when you've got the huge final climactic battle where you've got cops being erased left and right, it's still just a case that it's a little too cliched where there's no real stakes. I mean, even as you have like the main villain beating up Ryan Reynolds' character in a way that would pretty much kill most people, I understand he's already dead, it's just a case where your suspension of disbelief is pretty much broken because he's still able to talk and everything, even though they established early in the film that they feel the pain from being injured. It's not like they actually stay injured, like they have to take a few days off, but they actually feel the pain. And with the huge climax, you don't really see that. I mean, it makes sense with Jeff Bridges' character since he's been part of the R.I.P.D. for many centuries, but with Ryan Reynolds' character, he should be reacting pretty realistically when it comes to the pain and wouldn't be able to speak as clearly as he was during the big epic final scene when they're trying to essentially stop, well, hell breaking loose. And the film also tries to be kind of more sentimental, but really, I think it's just a case that Jeff Bridges was probably not the best actor for the part, or really the character just didn't work for creating that kind of sentimentality, kind of that old veteran sort of thing that they were trying to go for. I mean, especially with Ryan Reynolds' character trying to contact his wife, but he's stuck in the body of the Chinese guy. That's another thing that kind of bothered me, because I understand that that's how they looked at everybody else, but it really would have been nice to actually see more and more of other people's reactions to, well, the old Chinese guy, and not just the fact that Jeff Bridges is in the body of a hot blonde. Just something, because, again, the scenes where he's trying to talk to his wife, but everybody just sees him as the old Chinese guy, just didn't really work, because although everyone else sees him that way, we're not seeing him as the old Chinese guy that as much throughout the film. And during the times where we do see it, there's only one time where it was funny, but the other times it's just a case of So yeah, overall this film's kind of forgettable and just mediocre. I mean, the effects are kind of the story needed work, and there are just some scenes that just didn't quite work, and really it needed to be refined a little bit. And, well, it just doesn't feel like the film you really should pay full price for. It feels like something you would rent from Netflix if you were bored or at home sick or something. That's pretty much all I can say about it. It feels like something that you would rent as opposed to see in theaters. That said, on my personal scale, I'm giving R.I.P.D. a 3 out of 5. So that's it for this week's episode of Romney's Reviews. As for next week, since the paper's officially ended its run for the summer, videos are going to become kind of sparse depending on if I can go to the advanced screenings more often or not, so it's all in the card. It's not really in the cards at the moment as to what film I'm going to be reviewing next for certain, but If no Kofobo screenings come up during this next week, then I'll be taking a look at The Wolverine. See ya then.